Welcome to Implausible Nature, home to competitive Black Templars gameplay. Hello, everyone. Today we have Patrick Martin of Fortified Position Painting on the channel today, doing a little bit of an interview about his experience in the Dallas Open GT in Texas. So, Patrick, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hey guys, glad to be here. My name's Patrick. I'm a software developer in Rhode Island, and I've been in the 40K scene for a while. I started as a 12-year-old in third edition, and my first Space Marine army was Black Templars. Obviously, I had good taste even as a kid, and now I've been in and out of the tournament scene for the last couple of years. Just getting back into Black Templars, and I was fortunate enough to take them to the Dallas Open this past couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's awesome. What kind of brought you to the Black Templars? What kind of interests you about them? And why did you decide to bring them to a competitive tournament?
So, Black Templars are an army that I really wanted to get back into for a couple of years now, and actually, the Indominus box was actually what tipped me over the scales, and I saw all of those melee Primaris Marines, and I was like, okay, it's time to pull the trigger. I'm gonna go in. I'm gonna do a combat Space Marine army. I haven't done this in a very long time, and I'm really excited to see where it can go. And I really wanted with this army to sort of tap into some conversions and sort of take everything up to 11 with Space Marines, whereas my traditional Space Marines are all Imperial Fists, and where I keep everything really clean and really kind of basic, and I kind of wanted to go like up to 11 with everything with Black Templars and sort of make them the Zelda's Crusaders that they are. And I'm glad to be able to take them to a major competitive event, and I think do pretty well with them, considering it was my second time putting them on the table.
Tell us a little bit about your list. Walk us through what choices you made and why you made those choices for your list.
Okay, I'm going to start with my detachment is a Vanguard detachment, um, and I had a Primaris Chaplain on bike who I've upgraded to the Master of Sanctity. I've got the it's not the Rosarius, it's the upgraded book for roll two dice and pick the highest for each of the casts. Um, I've got the Warlord trait on him, where I've got +1 to advance and charge, which is Frontline Commander, which I have to say is my favorite Black Templars Warlord trait. Frontline Commander is excellent. It's one of those like universally amazing Warlord traits that always plays a role in every game. And it really helped me out with that reliability piece for their charges. Um, and for his litanies, I picked Fires of Devotion, and I picked Divine Protection. Generally speaking, I use them to buff up my Vanguard veteran squads, and I would send them out to kill stuff using that advance and charge stratagem. The other HQ I had was the Dominus Captain model, which I give another Warlord trait. He's the actual Warlord, and I give him the aura of Objective Secure from the main Space Marine rulebook. It's very good. However, it's the one Warlord trait that I might at some point switch out. I find Objective Secure was less of a big deal than I thought it was going to be. By that I mean, generally, if you're holding an objective, it's because with Black Templars, it's because you've killed everything off. At least with an elite Black Templars army like I was playing, if I had objective secured, I was still being outnumbered by enemy models because it was either Scarab Swarms, Necron Warriors, lots of little Dark Eldar models. Uh, I was being outnumbered. So the objective secure really didn't play too much of a role. And I think I could maybe switch that out for something a little different going forward. Um, the next model I had was the Apothecary, which I think he's um, he's auto take for Space Marines right now, especially now with Black Templars with the Crusader helm. Is the relic. Obviously, Selfless Healer and Master of Sanctity, not Master of Sanctity, Chief Apothecary. Um, and then I had two 5-man units of Blade Guard veterans, one with a Volkite because it's modeled that way, and two large 10-man squads of Vanguard veterans, jump packs. These are all kitted out with at least 4 Lightning Claws, a Chainsword or 2, and at least 3 Thunder Hammers. And the sergeants have a Relic Blade on them, which I really like the Relic Blade. The Relic Blades came in uh, very good use throughout the games. And I really liked the mix and mash of weapons through the Vanguard veteran squads because what it allowed me to do was if I wanted to combat squad them, I could. And it meant that I could I could make an anti-infantry squad and an anti-tank squad from the units. So I just take all the Thunder Hammers and the Relic Blade, um, and then all the Lightning Claws go in another unit. And I could send them off to do different things if I wanted to. But that didn't always make sense. I usually wanted to keep at least one 10-man squad. And that one 10-man squad would get all the buffs turn 1, and it would go out and kill stuff, wrap it, and then prevent it from falling back so that they would be protected a good bit from Counter-Strike. The next thing was I took a Redemptor Dreadnought with the classic loadout, the Plasma, Storm Bolters, the Gatling Gun, and the Icarus Missile Pod. And then in the fast attack choice, I took the Inceptors with Plasma, took 5 of these guys, 3 of these guys. My original list was 5, but I pared it down to 3 for points. And then I took 5 Eradicators as my heavy support. These I'm not 100% sold on. I had a hard time keeping them with the rest of the army if they were ever shooting anything. So what I ended up doing with them a lot was holding them back with my Apothecary and actually just holding the back objective. And if anything came in on my back objective, they got Auspex scanned with 10 or I guess 5 melter shots because I think the double shooting only happens in the shooting phase, and since it's not the shooting phase, you don't get it. But yeah, so that's a really fun thing to hold back, and if someone wants to be daring and send something in to snipe my Apothecary out, oh, well, I can just melt at you. And the last thing I had was the Impulsor, which just had a Storm Bolter. I didn't give it any other upgrades, so no 5-up invul save. And I have to say, I don't think I did wrong by not having the 5-up invul save. Generally, if anyone shot at the Impulsor, it was just completely destroyed. There's so much anti-tank options out there. If they're shooting at it, it's going to go. If you can get a line on it, it's not that many wounds. 5-up invul save really, I don't think is the most important thing, especially if you don't have the points for it. I think it's 20 points for that invul save, which I would rather put into other models. But yeah, it was kind of a not my favorite pick. I have to admit, I got it stuck a couple of times in my games, especially the first game I played against Necrons. I forgot that these guys lost fly is actually what happened, and so I went to charge turn 1 up the field, and I realized, oh, I can't go over this tiny little hill here, So I have to go all the way around the entire map because I didn't adjust the terrain correctly. Okay, so I just basically have a transport that's stuck in my deployment zone the entire game. So that was my first big flop, was not realizing that I didn't adjust the terrain properly at the start of the match so that I could actually get my models out of my deployment zone. So always check that stuff. It's a good lesson to learn, but not one you want to learn while doing a competitive event. Okay. Uh, and so I have to say, like, my top units were definitely the Vanguard veterans, definitely the Blade Guard, the Apothecary, and the Chaplain of Bike. I really liked all of these guys. If I have to say one criticism with the Apothecary, it's that everything else in my army wants to go up the field, and he sometimes gets stuck behind, and it's hard to keep up with him at times. I really wish there was a jump pack or bike options for this guy, like some of the other chapters. But where it's at, he's still amazing, and I'm gonna still use him. But I wish he could move a little faster. And yeah, that's pretty much my list. I think it went well. The uh, the other thing is, I built and painted this whole list in a month from top to bottom. So it was I just set up what I wanted to do for a list, and I just cranked through the models, and I think it came out pretty okay.
Yeah, it took a lot of great units. There's not really, at least in my eyes, not really anything to complain about as far as your unit choices. What do you think, Bob?
Yeah, first off, I do want to comment that I was watching your progress on Facebook, and it was kind of great to see the start to finish on that. Pretty impressive what you were able to get on the board in a month. Definitely impressive. Yeah, as far as the list itself, pretty solid. Pretty much in the vein of the elite armies that we've seen for it. The Impulsor is kind of a newer thing that's been kind of falling out of favor for the reasons that you mentioned. It lost fly, and that kind of first turn combo kind of went away from us. So it was kind of nice to see someone using that and kind of hearing how it impacted their list a little bit. But another thing that I kind of heard when you were talking about it is how you like the different Vanguard setups, and Alex and I kind of use that same setup. A lot of competitive players are very adamant that lightning claws are the way to go all the way across the board, and I just can't get behind that.
No, no, I can't tell you how often the Thunder Hammers just really turned it around, and even just the chain swords for some cheaper bodies. Chain swords with Assault Doctrine, they can kick out a lot of attacks, and with our Super Doctrine in effect, can wound pretty well because you don't have to worry about it on sixes to hit. So I was really happy with them. Uh, I think the Impulsor Rush was just the Impulsor Rush just it works against naive opponents, but it doesn't. It's never going to work against a tough opponent. So it's one where like it's a one trick kind of pony, as they say. If someone knows how to like screen for it and like to expect it, um, it I don't think it'll work very well. But you can't the advanced and charge Vanguard veterans turn one. It's a lot harder to screen those out.
Yeah, definitely. And to your point with the chainsword models, we tend to run very, very tight lists points wise because we're running big, enormous units of elite infantry. That gets very expensive. So having an option like that that's still, solid is always helpful. One thing I do want to point out for Auspex Scan and Eradicators do say in your shooting phase, but Auspex Scan also says that unit can shoot as if it were your shooting phase. I believe they would get to shoot twice based on that wording.
Yeah, I was always a little bit uncertain about that one, so I caution myself to just do the single shot. But yeah, That makes sense based on that wording.
Yeah. You did finish 98th out of the 172. So that officially your score was 4-3 with a drop in game 8. Game 7, you understand, was a bye, so they scored you a win on that one. So actual game played was 3-3. So walk me through your games and how you approached each one and what you thought about your opponents.
Okay, so I guess I'll start at the top. My first game was with a very nice gentleman who was playing Necron Army. He had a Silent King build with lots of immortals with the Gauss weaponry, so it's a lot of Strength 5, -2 AP. So all of my Storm Shield Space Marines were kind of in a bad time with all of those rerolls and the perfect combination of getting rid of my saves and wounding me on threes. So it was, I think, an uphill battle from the beginning. I was able to pull off a couple of cheeky moves where I was able to develop push into some things and lock some stuff up. I was also able to use, tenacious assault on some immortals turn one and really lock in a big squad of Vanguard veterans in his back lines and contest the right side of the board for a while. But I think ultimately my list wasn't quite what I need to deal with that many immortals and that many bodies on the field. So definitely it's something for me to keep in back of my mind for future list building is sort of how to deal with some of those really tough units that are also really good at killing my models. Um, the second game I had was against Iron Warriors. I was able to pull out a pretty uh, good win against them. Young guy, I think he was very new to the game. It was a good game. I got to try out a couple of things that I wasn't quite sure would be optimal, but I tried out some different secondaries in that game. Um, I tried Oaths of Moment for the first time. It's my first time really playing with that secondary. Um, and I was able to, kill a lot of vehicles and score the secondaries in that respect. Um, I did something different in the second game, which was I sort of baited out with my Vanguard veterans. Um, my first game, I kept them very cagey and made it so it was impossible to shoot them turn one. In the second game, I put them out to lure out all of his dealing uh, tanks and whatnot. And then I was able to use his movement towards me in order to engage with multiple close combat weapons and wrap up all of his tanks and damage dealing models in turn two, and ultimately lock him down the whole game in combat. So I sort of used it as a bait as opposed to just being really defensive with the Vanguard vets. They can, with the Storm Shields, really take some punishment, especially depending on the types of weapons that are coming at them. And you just have to know the opponent and how much damage they can kick out. Sometimes it might not work. In my latter games, I ended up losing some of my Vanguard veterans very early by trying to be a little bit more forward advanced with them to try to get those turn one charges. And it worked and it didn't work depending on, I think, the skill of the opponent. My third game, I was able to play against the New Drakari, and boy, can I tell you, these guys are tough. Um, the big winners, at least what I saw, were the Raiders can just absolutely wipe out any of my vehicles that I put on the field that don't have an impulse save. That -4 AP, that flat D3 +3 damage from the Dark Lances, they're brutal, and they can just wipe everything out as far as vehicles go. Um, the other thing was the Hellions. I was really stumped when fighting Hellions in this game because I remember playing Hellions last edition, and they were the most flimsy units ever. Now, in this edition, I charged a 5-man unit of Blade Guard veterans with uh, Assault Doctrine, instituted by the Crusader Helm, and a full squad of Vanguard veterans into them. And I killed 3. They turned around and killed half of my Blade Guard veterans and half of my Vanguard veterans. And I was just blown away. It was absolutely stunning. What I thought was a fast attack choice can just weather with the right buffs. It can just weather a blistering assault. So definitely one to keep your eyes peeled for and to not fall for the bait like I did. I also dealt with the succubus that I think everyone knows at this point, and she came in and just obliterated my other 5-man squad of Blade Guard veterans. I was, however, able to take her out in the process. So for those of you who don't know, the combination of perks and traits on the succubus allows her to throw out like 30 plus attacks because all failed get to be re-rolled into new attacks. I think it's everything that doesn't fail to wound, you get to generate new attacks. Anyway, look it up if you get the chance. But the bottom line is they throw out a huge number of attacks that have AP and multiple damage, and they can just tear through anything. The 60-point model can kill basically anything you throw at it. But I was able to use Vicious Riposte to kill her in the process. So when she charged my Blade Guard, I was able to Vicious Riposte kill her in the process, which I think was is a terrible trade because I think that was like over 200 points, and she is 60. But just stopping her from just wiping through all my lines is definitely it's a way of dealing with her. But honestly, I don't know the best way of dealing with her. She is probably something that needs to be tuned down through FAQs, to be honest. And yeah, that was my first day of play. It was one win against the Iron Warriors, 2 losses, once against Necrons and the second against Dragari. So after the end of day 1, I was feeling a little bit negative about my performance. 2 really tough armies with very good leaders. And I moved into day 2, where I played a lot of Harlequins, and I also played against Deathwatch. The first game of Harlequins went really well. I was able to pull out a victory. However, I started running into these scenarios a couple of times throughout my games, especially against players who were a little less familiar with the rules. And that was when I would play a stratagem that I would consider like a trap stratagem, like tenacious assault, so like you can't fall back if you're locked in combat, or devout push, which we all know, or vicious riposte, or even Auspex scam. I would get the feedback of, well, can you take that back? I didn't know you could do that. Which, as a player in a tournament, puts you in a very awkward position. Because on one hand, I can be a jerk or, do what actually I'm allowed to do by playing that and just go on with it and say, no, this is how it works. I'm sorry, but this is my rule. But a lot of times people will try to talk you out of doing it. And it's an interesting, difficult conversation to have, so that you don't like shoot yourself in the foot, but you also don't feel like you're cheating your opponent out of like a good experience, which I don't like to do, even if I'm in a competitive environment. I don't like to make the other player not have a good time in the process. Um, so I had a couple of those interesting moments. One of them was in this Harlequin game where I could have very easily devout pushed several times into really important things, and um, either he would say, "Oh, well, I wasn't supposed to be within 3 inches," or I didn't know you could do this," and I, I liked the guy, but it was just very awkward and very tough to navigate. But fortunately, I still won the game very well. But those sorts of things, the sorts of conversations, became a little awkward throughout the tournament, which led me to my second game against Harlequins that day, where I had a couple of other interesting rules things which were not helped by the judges. The first of which was there was a teleport ability that Harlequins can do, where it's a stratagem where they pick up 3 characters and teleport them across the board. They come in 9 inches away from enemy models. So he came in right behind my eradicators and my apothecary. The thought being he would then just shoot my apothecary and charge in with the solitaire, wipe out the eradicators. So my initial thought was, okay, I'll spec scan. This is a reinforcement. I can shoot it. It's in the rare rules, but it's a legitimate move. 2 judges came by and told me that that was incorrect and that I couldn't do that, which is not the way the rules work. And it ended up being they didn't let me do that. They asked me several times to find the passage in the book, which I couldn't find in the few seconds they gave me to find the exact passage that said I could aspect scan. So they said, okay, you can't do it. Sorry. So I was like, okay. And it ended up the solitaire misses charge, and it wasn't all that bad for the gameplay. But it was missed opportunity for me because I could have killed that character immediately and then been able to shoot at something else. And since I was taking Assassinate, being able to kill an extra character that turn would have gained me another 3 points. Another time in this game, the guy heroically intervened characters into combat under the premise that if I charge a unit, right, I as the charging player, charge a unit of, say, his witches, he can then heroically intervene with said character and engage me, but I will not be able to strike, which in the basic core rules of the game says that I can attack those models. And once again, 2 judges agreed with him and didn't know the core rules of the game, which turned me off a little bit to the judgmentship of the event. And I understand that 40K is a complicated game with a lot of rules, but I was really surprised that some of these basic rules were not well known by the judges, and that multiple judges came by and said that I was in the wrong when it was clearly stated this way in the rules. So for that, I was a little annoyed, and ultimately not being able to kill those 2 characters was almost a 12-point swing, and it would have won me that last game on the second day. So I was a little upset with that. Ultimately, it was the judge's fault. I don't blame the player at all. He was a good sport. He was under the wrong impression, but it's up to the judges to figure out and sort out these issues if there's an issue. It's not necessarily on the player themselves, in my opinion. And then the last game I was able to play was against Death Watch, and this was a really interesting game. It was kind of a mirror match because he had a lot of Vanguard veterans. I had a lot of Vanguard veterans. He had a lot of defensive, really tough units. So did I. But I was able to use my mobility and speed and really get to the corners of the board early on and stay there. And he castled up in the center, and I just scored all the primary. So use the Black Templar speed to your advantage, and it will really pay off, especially against units that are really tough and really durable. That's what I learned from that match, and it really worked out for me. I think I maxed basically everything in that game. But at the beginning, I thought I was done for because he had sort of the same tools as me to deal with all my stuff. So, in the case of a mirror match, it's tough to determine what you should do and what you should go after. I had a few fun moments in that. He actually took a 10 Terminator block, and my Inceptors, my plasma Inceptors, came down and just killed 7 of them in one shooting phase. They all maxed their shots. They all got max hits, max wounds, and they just annihilated them. And it was a pretty epic moment, really, to win it. I had a couple other epic moments. Actually, in my second game against Iron Warriors, the Iron Warriors player took a Knight Castellan. No, Valiant, the one with the flamer. And I got him down to 1 wound, and my captain, or Marshall in this case, just used his bolt pistol and just shot the last wound off, and he exploded and took out like 3 tanks, and it was just glorious. Those moments are just really priceless. Like you can't stage it. It's just very like Saving Private Ryan there at the end. But I think those moments really are fantastic when they happen, even in a competitive event. Like just because you're playing in a competitive event doesn't mean it can't have like narrative funness to it. It doesn't mean that like cool things won't happen. You can't enjoy it along the way. It's always fun to like really get into the game and really focus on the strategy, focus on what you're doing. But like at the end of the day, it's a game, and you should enjoy it and really live in the moment. It's what I like about it. That's why I like 40K.
Yeah, absolutely. I got into competitive gaming because I like, to be able to beat on each other essentially. If the opponent's like crushing me, I want to have that challenge of being able to come back and beat them, have those nail biter games.
Of course.
But at the same time, when you have those epic things that happen, you're like, that shouldn't have happened, but it worked. And you're both like, oh my gosh, whether it works for your favor or theirs. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we play this game. It's awesome. So I do also want to comment a little bit. You touched base a little bit about your opponents fighting you on your rules, and I know we talked about this a little bit in the Discord. So some of our members may be familiar with this conversation, but you really, in my opinion, can't let opponents slide on that. One of the things that it's good practice is to announce some of your bigger, more important stratagems that opponents may not know at the beginning of the game. And you don't want to take too much time because obviously you're timed on these games, but you're like, okay, this is a stratagem you may not know. Are you familiar with Devout Push? Yes, no. Okay, this is what I can do. And, kind of bring it up to their attention so they can't have that excuse later in the game.
Yeah, and I did that in most of my games. Like I usually am pretty good about like, okay, here's my basic rules. Like what my super doctrine does. What my sort of like my core stratagems do. Okay, like do you have any questions, comments? But it's kind of some of it is a little up to the opponent to ask questions, but some of it's my responsibility to disclose. Sometimes those get gray, especially because you you can't explain your entire strategy to your opponent either. You can't be like, hey, I'm going to do this next turn, and like, you should watch out for that.
And that's fine in a casual game, or someone who's new to the game or something like that. But when you're in a tournament, you are, to me, that's you're not expected to do that. I think, like you said, it's good practice to. I try to go over the big features of the army and the big gotcha things that we have. Do you, like you said, devout push? Go over that one, because that's a bit of a complicated one, and even seasoned players don't necessarily understand how that works. Emperor's Will, hey, I have a strat that I can advance and charge. Do you know my chapter tactics? I ignore mortal wounds on a 5+, and I can re-roll advances and charge rolls. Just make sure that you say it at the beginning of the game, and to me, it's after that, it's up to the player to remember that stuff. Especially when, like, something like Devout Push, you're probably going to use multiple times in a game. You can't be like, oh, well, I wouldn't have put them within 3 inches. Okay, well, I'm sorry, but you did. We're well past that now.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Especially in a tournament, like, if you're just playing a friendly game at your local game store, and it's like, I'm willing to be a lot more forgiving on stuff like that. But when you're at a big tournament, I'm sorry, you forgot to do X, Y, or Z, but we're well past that stage.
Yeah.
And it does it can leave a bit of a bad taste, I think, for players, especially newer players who are at a tournament. But you also have to understand, a tournament is a very competitive environment, especially a big tournament like the one you were at.
Yeah, I mean, it's a major.
And
Like, it's
you,
there's so
you
much.
gotta, yeah, you gotta have the expectation of going in, if you're a newer player, that, hey, I'm probably going to get blown away a few times here, as I learn the rules, and just expect that, people are not going to, um, constantly take mercy on you because you didn't know a rule.
Yeah, it's not going to be tolerated if you're anywhere near the top tables, you know. So they're going to be like, sorry, you know. Ultimately, they're there to win. So I feel that you did what you had to do, and you went a step probably further than you had to, allowing some of those things to.
Yeah, I think I look back and I think I shot myself. I lost a few points as a result of it in that game, but it didn't change the outcome of the game. But at the same time, it was like, well, it just sort of left some points on the table.
I've been in tournaments in the past that I my army list was accidentally tuned to win the missions that were given to us prior to these standardized things. And I basically held off the gas for my opponent because it was kind of a, well, I want them to have fun too. And then I ended up losing. So, while they may not have impacted your games this particular time, sometime they will, and every dice roll matters. So, not making that one devout push can cascade throughout the whole game and have negative consequences. So, the question that I was going to ask you next was, what would you change your list going forward now that you know what you do?
Yeah, I think so. A couple of the units on my painting table right now are Devastators, Grout Devastators. I needed some better backline presence. I found it hard to keep my home objectives. Um, I also found it hard to take certain objectives early, so I'm going to make a squad of infiltrators and a squad of cursors just to switch out so that I have some troops. And I also have just like a ton of assault intercessors that I can throw on the table. Um, I just really wanted a very elite army uh, for this build. Um, I think I think in the era of Drukari, some of these elite builds are going to fall away. So I kind of need to go um, more units as opposed to less very elite ones going forward. Um, I think that would be the main thing to change is to have a few more like expendable. I don't want to say expendable, but like lower cost units that I can just sit on objectives. I think Crusader squads would be a really good pick, um, but I'm just kind of doing the like primary scale everything. So for me, I just don't really want to buy or make Crusader squads at this point. Maybe at a later date. We'll see how it goes.
All right, Alex, do you have anything else for Patrick?
I don't think so. Thank you for coming on and joining us and sharing your experiences there. It's always great to get insight, into some of the bigger tournaments, especially for folks who aspire to do that. It's one thing to play in a tournament, with 20 people at your local game store. It's something else entirely to play at a massive tournament. I mean, there was what, 200 players,
Yeah,
almost.
yeah.
Totally different environment over a 2-day event. I mean,
It went 3 days.
it's 3 days. Was it 3 days? Okay. So yeah, 3-day event. I mean, that's a lot of 40K in a short amount of time.
Yeah.
So it's great to hear about sort of your experience with it and give us give especially some of our newer players who maybe aspire to do that, go to one of those one day. Some insight into it.
Yeah, I would say to any of those players, just do it. Just experience it if you have the opportunity. I mean, I was lucky to be able to go. I just happened to be in Texas that week, so I just signed up. But you know, um, try to go to some of these things. It you know it's a totally different experience than going to your local game tournament where you just have like generally at those tournaments you have like one guy who's like a tournament player and then a bunch of like other people who are just trying out their armies. But like you got really good people here playing. You get to the opportunity to see people that you see on YouTube and Instagram and stuff. Um, and you also just get to see like what are the top things being played and what can they do and why are they winning. And seeing it in person is a lot different than just hearing about it, like just hearing about the results. Like, oh, this list won, but like, what was the player doing, and how were they able to win? Those sorts of things are often missed if you don't actually see them in person.
Yeah, awesome. So that about wraps us up. So thank you for joining us for the nearly hour that you've been with us. Uh, you have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
If you want to see more content like this, hit that subscribe button and make sure you click the bell icon to get notified on all of our latest content. We have a Patreon and we greatly appreciate their support. So if you'd like to get some exclusive content or you'd just like to support the channel, we really appreciate it. Also, be sure to check out our Discord. We have an active community of players on there where you can get lots of help or discussion on all things Black Templars. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.